All right, welcome back. Today, we're grabbing our stethoscopes and putting a stock under the microscope. We're doing a full technical health checkup on the NASDAQ ticker TERN. We've got the latest data report, and we are going to dive deep, check its vitals, and see what's really going on under the hood. And, this really brings us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Tern has had this absolutely spectacular run, but what goes up must come down, or does it? So based on the cold, hard data, is this stock still in peak condition, or are we seeing some warning signs of a stumble? Let's find out together. So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by looking at the stock's recent and kind of wild history. Then we'll check its vital signs, right? We're talking the underlying trend, its momentum, and of course, volatility. And then at the end, we'll put it all together for a final diagnosis. Think of it like a complete workup on a patient. Okay, first things first. Before we check any of the internal numbers, we've got to understand the patient's recent history. A stock's price tells a story, and believe me, TRDN's story has been a real page-turner lately. Getting this context is absolutely crucial. I mean, just look at the speed of this thing. At the end of October, Tern was just a quiet $8 stock. Then early November hits, and bam, a huge surge in volume, and the price just takes off. Then the rally goes absolutely parabolic in early December, peaking just 2 days later at over $48. Wow. Since then, it's pulled back a bit, kind of catching its breath around that $40 mark. What a ride. And this really puts the sheer scale of that move into perspective. This is the 52-week trading range. It went from a low of under $2 to a high over $48. So yeah, this wasn't just some small jump. This was a fundamental repricing of the entire stock by the market, and it happened in a blink of an eye. Okay, time for our first vital sign check, the underlying trend. Is a patient's core health actually strong, or was that incredible price surge just, a temporary fever? This is where we zoom out and look at the bigger picture. So the key takeaway from this chart is that massive gap between the short-term and the long-term averages. See how the 5-day and 10-day are hovering right around the current price, near $41? Now look down at the long-term ones. The 150-day is way down at $13, and the 200-day is below $11. This is basically screaming at us that an incredibly powerful, very recent uptrend has taken hold. And just to be sure about the strength of that trend, we look at an indicator called the Average Directional Index, or ADX. The current reading for Tern comes in at 51.08. So, what does that number actually mean for us? Well, it means the trend is ridiculously strong. Seriously. Most traders consider an ADX reading over 25 to be strong. Anything over 50, that's like an athlete in absolute peak physical condition. So, vital sign number 1 is crystal clear. The underlying trend is powerfully, undeniably bullish. But, a strong trend doesn't quite tell the whole story. So for our second vital sign, we're checking momentum. You can think of this as the patient's energy level. Are they still sprinting at full speed, or are they starting to get a little tired? And this is where the story gets a lot more complicated. And right here you can see the conflict. On the one hand, you've got indicators that measure sustained strength, like the RSI, and they're still looking pretty good. But on the other hand, indicators that measure the rate of change, the short-term exhaustion, well, things like the MACD and stochastics, they've all turned negative. It's a real mixed bag, a classic sign of a tug-of-war between the bulls and the bears. Let's zoom in on one of those key warning signs, okay? This is the value of the MACD histogram. It's a super popular momentum indicator, and right now it's negative. It's sitting at minus 1.04. So a negative number here basically means the faster short-term trend is now lagging behind the slower long-term one. It's often one of the very first signs that a powerful move is losing steam. It's kind of like a little yellow flag, a warning light on the dashboard, telling you that the explosive energy is starting to fade. But hold on, remember I said it was a mixed picture? Well, let's look at the other side of the coin with the Relative Strength Index, or RSI. Its current reading is 61.50. Now, an RSI above 50 is still considered bullish. So while the stock isn't in that overbought red zone anymore, that's a reading over 70, it hasn't flipped over to bearish territory either. This suggests that, well, the all-out sprint might be over, but the stock isn't totally exhausted. It's more of a healthy cooldown than an outright collapse. All right, let's move on to our final set of vitals, volatility and volume. For this last check, think of volatility as the patient's heartbeat. Is it racing or is it calm? And think of volume as the crowd's participation. Is the market still intensely focused on this stock, or is its attention starting to drift somewhere else? Let's start with volatility using these Bollinger Bands. Notice how the current price, around $40, is trading super close to that middle band. Now, during that explosive move up, it would have been riding the upper band way up near $50. This tells us the day-to-day price swings have calmed way, way down. The heartbeat is returning to a much more normal rhythm. And hey, for anyone who isn't familiar with them, no worries. Bollinger Bands are just a simple tool that creates a channel around a stock's moving average. When that channel gets wider and the price pushes against the top, volatility is high. When it narrows, or the price comes back to the middle like we're seeing now, it just means volatility is decreasing. Simple as that. And now for our final metric, volume. This number here represents the relative volume. It just compares recent trading activity to its average. And for Tern, that score is 0.391. This score is pretty telling. Anything below a 1.0 means fewer shares are being traded than usual. So this low volume, combined with that lower volatility we just saw, suggests the stock is in a quiet consolidation phase. The intense focus from the crowd that drove the price up seems to have faded, at least for now. So, we've reviewed the patient's history, we've checked all the key vitals. For our final section, it's time to put all these pieces together. Let's get to the final diagnosis. What is the overall health of Tern right now? Okay, here's the bottom line. The stock score, its long-term trend, is incredibly strong. No question about it. However, its short-term vitals are showing clear signs of fatigue. Momentum is mixed at best, with some key indicators flashing warning signs, and the trading volume has dropped off a cliff. So the patient has a really strong constitution, but it's clearly tired after a massive workout. And that leaves us with the ultimate question, right? We have this clear conflict, a powerful long-term trend fighting against weakening short-term indicators. So is this just a healthy rest stop for the stock to catch its breath before it starts climbing again? Or are these signs of fatigue a warning that the summit has already been reached? The data doesn't give us a final answer, but it definitely frames the debate for what comes next. Thanks for digging into the charts with me today.